whoever.
Pages.
Right. Are you all set? I was gonna do something like that, but I got told today, so I was like, okay, 5:15, I'm leaving to Boston. I'm like, oh, I ran to the house.
Our fire chief is the best.
Get my sport coat.
Yeah. That's pretty tight. Nobody will convince me. And I was like, he's very cool. But he was already on it.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Call to order a committee of the whole and subcommittee on finance and property on this June 1st day where we are continuing. Thank you, Mr. Perry.
You're welcome.
Continuing our budget
Outside
hearings.
the scope.
No.
We're going to start this evening with our planning director, Darlene Nguyen. Good evening, Ms. Nguyen. Yes. Yes. I'm sure you sat in rapt attention on Tuesday and watched the budget hearings then, so you totally know the ropes.
I'll say yes.
Just in case, yeah. We know that you're, with the digital book, budget book, that we have some information here, but if you'd like to say a few words before we jump straight into questions, you have a moment.
Sure, thank you. First, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to present my budget, and also thank my staff for attending. Almost all of them are here, so Thursday night makes it easy for them to attend. And I thought it would be a good experience for them to see, since I have a couple of new staff members, what this is like. And yeah, as you mentioned, all of the information about the Planning and Development Department that I could consolidate and condense into a brief summary is available in the budget book. But to make it even briefer, we focus on short-range planning and development review and permits and applications and decisions and enforcements and technical assistance, thanks to my excellent staff who are really, really good at customer service. And then we also focus on long-range planning, so we can split our time between that and doing what I call the kind of more aspirational projects, working on zoning updates, long-range plans. We've had a master plan, a housing plan, an open space plan, those types of things. So that's kind of the high-level overview of what the Planning and Development Department does. I'm happy to answer any questions about our budget.
Would you like to introduce your staff?
Sure. So starting from the left, Jared Contrada is our newest associate planner. He's been here for about 2 weeks, and he's doing fantastic. Cindy McPherson, one of the maybe longest-serving members of City Hall staff, and we're grateful to have her in our department. David Spitalier is our conservation agent, and Ken Clausen, I went left to right, is our assistant planning director. He's been on board for about 2 months.
Great.
Also doing fantastic work. So.
Great. Thank you very much. I'll ask the members of the subcommittee first if you have any questions for Ms. Nguyen. Go ahead, Councilor St. Hilaire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ms. Nguyen. And this time of year, it's always good to acknowledge the good work that does happen, and I really appreciate your work in all of your teams, especially your responsiveness. It really helps all of us to communicate with our constituents and know what's going on behind the scenes. So I appreciate that. One of the things I noted in the ClearGov overview is just the scope of your department, right? Overseeing 10 boards and commissions. I think it's easy to forget, how much, you touch. I guess what I'm asking is just regarding your staffing level. Any comments on how you feel about your team and ability to get all of this done? And I also noted some changes in some of the staff salary lines, and maybe if you could comment on what those moves or were those moves and how that all plays together.
Sure. It's been a year where we've entirely turned over our staff, in some positions twofold. COVID has certainly had challenges in terms of the job market and hiring, introduced these challenges to us, but I think we're getting to a great place. But before that, just generally staff, I think you can always do more with more.
Yeah.
But we've learned how to really operate a lean ship in terms of our staffing capacity and do the best that we can with the resources that we do have. We've effectively been able to continue to manage all the requirements that we have to do in terms of our regulatory responsibility for reviewing applications and permits, issuing decisions, meeting the timelines that those regulations require of us. And also, really, as you mentioned, I think, and thank you for that, for trying to be really responsive to constituents and the council members and other staff members. I think, as I said, we really do the best that we can with the staff that we have. I think we are looking at, you'll notice that we did increase a couple of the staffing lines, mainly because it's become a really competitive market. We used to get 30 applications for a job before COVID, now we're getting 4 or 5. And so really, it was mostly the adjustment, like for the assistant planning director, that adjustment was made because the salary really was not comparable to any of the other communities that are around us that have a similar position with a similar level of expectation for job experience and qualifications. And so that was kind of to make it on par with other communities and make it a competitive position. For the conservation agent, it was a similar thing. We actually created an entirely new position. We had an environmental planner, but we turned it into a conservation agent, gave that position a little bit of supervising responsibility, and correspondingly increased the salary for that position, the grade for that position. It also absorbed, that position used to get a stipend from the wetlands fees, which they no longer receive. So it was kind of making a correction that had been anticipated a number of years ago as well. And that
Something was up.
yeah. And that position too, we are hopefully soon going to hire a part-time field agent, which will be funded with the wetlands fees entirely. But that's to help really with the workload of the conservation agent who, especially in the summer months, site visits and enforcement calls are really just constant. So that position will hopefully be filled in the next month or so.
Great. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Council President.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Nguyen. I definitely share Councilor St. Hilaire's feelings about your responsiveness, your team's work, and certainly the breadth and depth of the workload of the planning department. So I think sort of adding on to or piggybacking on Councilor St. Hilaire's question, one line item that I noticed has sort of steadily decreased over the historical view that we have here. And so I'm asking about this just sort of in balance about how much work your department takes on and if this is sufficient support is the consultant line item. And I guess I'm wondering, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, some of those higher historic numbers, we had some unique things going on, the master plan, looking at the Bass River resiliency and that project. So I'm curious if you anticipate less need for consultants sort of where we're at right now, or if you have concerns at all about a lower line item here in terms of your dedicated staff being able to get the many projects done.
Yeah, I think, certainly the highest level, $100-something thousand a couple of years ago, that was specifically for the master plan. We evaluate that when I meet with the mayor and Bryant every year, kind of thinking about what are the projects that we want to take on for the next fiscal year, and what's a reasonable expectation about whether we would do that in-house or with consultants. I think for this year, and part of that too is we can offset that with grants. So for example, last year we contemplated doing downtown parking study, and we put that in my consulting budget. And then we applied for a grant for that, which we didn't find out we got until the fall, and that was great. So that was able to offset some of the costs. And so we're constantly looking at grants as ways to offset the consultant and supplement the work that we get. We do have the benefit of, a number of grants, and right now some of which are due tomorrow, some significant funding opportunities to help offset. If you want, some of the things I'm thinking about for next year in regards to the consultant line, and I think just capacity and staffing, I'm comfortable with that number this year, based on, I think, what we're anticipating doing and where we can get also free technical assistance. That includes typically $10,000 for membership fees for the North Shore Alliance, the North Shore TMA, and any other similar organizations that we are members of. We use it for grant matches and support for small projects that we do. For larger projects, I am thinking that I may need to enlist our consultant for the design standards and master plan to make some modifications to the actual design standards document based on the feedback that we got and some of the changes we've made to the zoning ordinance. I may need to look to that line for MBTA communities compliance. There's a lot of free technical assistance that we are getting for that, but we do have to do a economic analysis of the inclusionary housing, of our inclusionary housing ordinance, to demonstrate that it's feasible for us to require that. And I don't really know what that means yet, and so I think that's something I might have to pay for, or maybe I can get technical assistance for it. And then the other kind of larger project we were looking at is a sign ordinance update. It's a kind of entire rewrite and audit of our existing sign ordinance and rewriting it. And that we are applying for a grant, deadline tomorrow for that, but in case we don't get it, it's in there. If we do get the grant, then we can kind of look at it as potential extra money that's available to reallocate to something else.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I just thinking about the number of projects that your department has been taking on, just want to get your thoughts about how comfortable you felt with that. And it sounds like very comfortable, and I appreciate sort of knowing where you're thinking about it going this year too. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Councilor Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and as other councilors have said, thank you for the work that you've been doing, especially with the Legal Affairs Committee. We've been keeping you busy in the last year with all the zoning changes, so I certainly appreciate the time that you put into working with us. Building off of the situation with staffing, and it's great to see some new faces here and that you're able to fill some of these vacant positions. Just to make sure that I'm understanding where you stand currently, I know that there is an ongoing search for the economic development planner, and then it sounds like an ongoing search for a part-time field agent in conservation. Are those the only two positions that are still vacant on your staff that you're looking to fill?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And we've been in interviews for both of those positions. Maybe very close with the part-time field agent. It's still not quite ready to make an offer with the economic planners, looking ideally. We are so close, and as you're aware, there's been this compensation study. We're kind of so close to that point. I'm more interested in waiting to see if that is put forth so I can make an offer that's competitive.
And that's good to hear, and certainly mentioning the compensation plan, I'm looking forward to when the stage of the process moves to the City Council for our review. With regards to line item spending, the one that I have a question about is the $205,000 for the shuttle bus service. Is that money that we, as a city, pay directly to CADA for their Cape Ann transportation, whatever the second A is, for their services?
Yes, that goes directly to CADA for their transportation services through an RFP process. And we are also recipients of a federal grant, actually. They're called the Suburban Subsidy Program, now Supplemental Transportation Program, I think is the new name. And that pays up to 50% of the cost of services, but really we get $55,000 to $65,000 paid by the federal government for that to offset the 205. Well, right now it's 185, and that grant goes into the general fund.
Okay, that's good to know. And I know that prior to the pandemic, there had been some work on a pilot program in Beverly with regards to last mile transportation, specifically from Beverly Depot to the Cumming Center, one of our biggest employment center. Have you guys, since that time, and I know you've been busy with other projects as well, but have you looked at all at whether or not the value might be there for Beverly to try to supplement some of CADA's services with regards to last mile?
So we've been looking at it because also the supplemental transportation grant, a new RFP was issued last year. We did a lot of research into whether or not we could move towards an on-demand shuttles type service, fixed route or both. What we found is, and what we heard from talking to CADA, who runs an on-demand service in Gloucester as well as Salem, is that it's much more expensive than $200,000 that I have available in my budget. So I can't add it on from CADA to CADA. I can't necessarily switch without, and so I think it requires more research and more kind of investigation. You know, we're trying to figure out, you know, whether we can work with Salem on their skipper. So there's a number of kind of pieces that are still in the air, and that might be another area of, you know, if we have some consulting money, kind of hiring somebody to help us with that challenge too. The North Shore TMA had run the pilot of the wave for us, and they're kind of not operational at the moment either, so that would be a resource that we would normally go to and help us run that service. So there's still, I guess, a number of irons in the fire related to that one. It's something we'd like to figure out a way to do. Right now, it's really prohibitively expensive.
Okay, thank you. And again, I appreciate the time to be with us tonight.
Thank you. Councilors over here? Councilor Bowen.
Thank you. I echo the thanks, and those questions were the same things on my mind, really. And so happy to hear that there may be some more investigation of a variety of transportation options. So I think the only other question I had, or two small questions. One sort of related to transportation. Are there any thoughts right now on reviving the mobility hub depot planning process? Is that?
It's always in the back of my mind. It's like mobilizing. I mean, I think we're at the next phase of kind of, the phase now would be kind of bringing it to full design. There are ownership issues that need to be resolved, as well as just kind of capacity and labor issues, and, you know, kind of making it a priority to do. But really, I think the next hurdle we were working on was, you know, we don't own the land that would be primarily affected when you talk like the parking spaces that would be most significantly impacted by kind of making a physical change to that Park Street interplay. So, you know, it's certainly a fun project that I wish could have moved forward sooner, but it's kind of sits there as like, oh yeah, let's get back to that when we can.
Got it. So it sounds like that's one that if there were money left in the consulting line or there were grants available, might be down the list, but isn't top of the list even for those.
It's kind of pushing it off. I'm at the phase where I'm pushing it off to another department. Mm-hmm. So it really becomes more of an infrastructure construction project. And so that's kind of where I am.
And then one other question was just where you see the planning department's role in visioning process or planning process around the Cabot Street property that we were discussing a couple of weeks ago.
The Family Dollar building?
Yeah, what that timeline and process may look like.
Oh, I mean, I think we'll be significantly involved in kind of, we were very much involved in the Briscoe project in terms of the participating in the committee and preparing information for the committee who were talking about the reuse of that building, preparing the RFP, you know, meeting with potential interested parties who, you know, might be able to help us craft an RFP or work and figure out a future reuse for that parcel. I think we'll play a large role in that.
And is that something that fits within the budget as presented, or is that further down the line?
I don't see it as anything that's going to, it's not like a budgetary thing. I don't see us needing to hire a consultant. I mean, we did, you know, we have the appraisal line, like things like that. We paid for the appraisal for that already. But if there were additional, like, kind of small items like that we needed to do, we have the appraisal line to kind of cover those legal costs and things like that.
Thanks. That's it.
Okay. Councilors? I have one question in sort of, I'm not sure exactly where it sort of dovetails, whether it's consultant or visioning, as Councilor Bowen mentioned. What is the interaction between, or collaboration, if you will, between, say, Main Streets as an organization and the planning department? I know in the past, Main Streets has done, you know, large visioning projects and plans. Can you just comment on that?
Sure. We work very closely with Beverly Main Streets, certainly with Lindsay as the executive director, and very much so with Jen. We have whether it's me or the economic planner or both of us, we participate in their board of directors meetings and other committee meetings, and interface with them when they have questions about city activities or events or how to get things done. Similarly, kind of that technical assistance we provide and help navigate, where to go for what thing when they have questions. And then also together, Beverly Main Streets, the City of Beverly, and Montserrat College of Art are the three partners of the Beverly Arts District. So we work very closely together, meeting quarterly, with the larger partnership, and more often the three or four of us to talk about the Beverly Arts District and try to move that forward and kind of continue the progress that we had in the Arts District. So, that's, I think, we don't fund them through our project line, but our budget line, but we do work with them quite frequently.
So I guess fair to say, as with Montserrat, it's a valuable part of the mix in terms of downtown planning and activities then.
Sure. I think, I think different partners have different roles, and Beverly Main Streets has able to provide things that we can't provide. Our economic development staff person would not be able to provide in terms of volunteer labor and on the ground, kind of boots on the ground things.
Okay, thank you. Unless there are any other questions, thank you for being here, Ms. Nguyen, and look forward to interacting more with you and the staff in this coming year.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Next person on our list for this evening is our illustrious city clerk, Lisa Kent. Good evening, Ms. Kent.
Hello, how are you?
Fine, thank you. And yourself?
Good.
Good. I don't know that we, as counselors, necessarily have a need for you to explain to us what you do, but if you want to say a few words, certainly covered in the digital budget book as well, but if you want to say a few words before we jump into questions, you're welcome to do so.
I pretty much put everything in ClearGov of any changes, any new things that we had, any higher budget asks that I had. So I think if you read that, then
So you're good.
I'm good with it, yeah.
All right, okay, thank you. Questions from the subcommittee members? See any? Other counselors? Questions for Ms. Kent? Yes, Ms. Rand.
Thank you.
Councilor Rand.
I guess I just wanted to give you the opportunity to talk about elections and how, so much has changed with early voting and the systems you're using. And I think you and your staff do a wonderful job, and also are clearly a team, which I always love. And kudos to you for building that from within your department. But yeah, if you can just help, just kind of talk about how your elections are going forward, and they obviously require a little bit of an increase in the budget, which I support, but would love to hear the details, and for everybody else too, because you're doing great work.
Thank you. I put a lot of the details in ClearGov, but also I wanted to thank my staff, because without Christine, Dixon, and Will, and Katie, and Linda, we couldn't do the elections. We're a great team of 5, and we've been asked so much more since COVID, and since the presidential changes of the election, and mail voting, and all that stuff. So we just kind of go with the flow, and, we have to do what's asked by the state, which is more and more each year. So we try to get by with whatever we can with the budget we have. We do get some money back from the elections, so that helps, that we get like maybe 6 months after each election. Everybody's willing to put in the work, and, we're just really lucky that everybody enjoys the elections. It's actually one of my favorite things to do. So the more chaos, I think Christine and I get better at it, and, and we just have a good team. So, going forward with the move gives me a little stress, but, because it's a presidential year. But other than that, I think, we just keep doing what we do.
Excellent. Just a little follow-up. And are you continuing to be able to engage with young people for election day? Has that been working well?
Yep, that's one of our favorite things to do, is to reach out to the high school, ask those who are 16 and above to help at the polling locations. We had an intern that was there for the past month in the REACH program that she just was great, and now she's interested in working the polls for the election days. So we always enjoy the younger ones because they get to see the process. I think everybody should see the whole process, because it's not just going to the polls and putting your vote in. It's so much more, months before, months after, and for somebody that young to get involved, it's a good thing to see.
That's great, thank you.
Yeah, I just to follow up on that. In terms of staffing at the polls for elections, I know sometimes that has been challenging. How are you feeling about that right now, and sort of post-COVID? Are you feeling a bit more encouraged about making sure that, encouraged that you will have the staffing that you need at the polls?
It's always challenging, that's for sure. COVID did not help. We lost a lot of our longtime election workers, but we also got a lot of new ones that, decided because they were sitting home they wanted to help, and then they decided they liked it, so they come back. So we're kind of at a turnover right now, and the duties are harder, so we have to train more because we're asked by the state for more. And so I think with the newer, more people that are interested in politics and elections and everything, it's helping to have fresh faces. And we can teach them the way that we want to teach them. And like sometimes older ways are just old habits, so we can kind of break those because it's a whole new dynamic at the elections.
So for anyone who's watching who might be interested, what kind of training goes into, and how long does that take?
So we usually have a training before each election. It's usually a paid training, and they come for, and it's mandatory if they're new, that they go through. So we go through the whole system of actually, if you walk up to get your ballot, what happens to it, to go into the box, put it in, stuff like that. Whatever their job may be doing, if it's checking people in, we train that. Christine Dixon, the assistant city clerk, does the trainings. We have clerks that take notes throughout the day, and then at the end of the night, we read all the notes. So if there's a problem at the polls, if there's issues with ballots, that's their job. And then the warden, who oversees everybody at the polls, they have their job. So we have trainings for each and every job description, because they're all different. But it's probably like an hour each.
Okay, all right, thank you. Seeing no more questions for you, thank you very much, Ms. Kent.
Thank
Pleasure
you.
to see you this evening.
Can I?
Oh, yes,
Sorry.
Councilor Bowen.
Well, it's more of a comment
Almost.
than a question for the clerk per se. Though if you have thoughts on it, would love to hear. But I was hoping we could discuss a little bit the budget line for our budget and management analyst. I know we've discussed before. It is by charter a certain amount, half the funding
Finance
level
director,
of the budget of the finance director. And typically, the way we have it set up currently, we don't spend that full budget line on Mr. Perry's time. We spend some of it on other kind of budget and management analysis things, consultants and such. And so was just hoping to, float some ideas or get a sense for in the coming year. I know we looked at increasing the consultant rate for Mr. Perry's time and the amount of time that might be used, but just kind of getting a feel for how much there might be in that line available for other projects, and whether, I know we've floated some ideas in previous conversations about what those priorities might be. So I thought this might be a good time to
Okay, sure.
have a little bit of that
Mr.
discussion.
Perry, our budget analyst, budget and management analyst.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the council. Great questions, Council Bowen. As you know, the appropriation for my line item is half of the finance director's salary. What we have historically done, you are absolutely correct. I have not billed the city for my entire time. I'm trying to save the taxpayers a little money, but, you know, I have a little system in place with you all. I think hopefully you're satisfied with the services you receive. I average about 600 to 650 hours a year. It averages about 12 hours a week. In the summertime, I disappear, but the rest of the year, like this time of the year, I'm putting 20 to 30 hours a week in with the budget. So, yes, you are correct. There will be money left over. I've thought about this when I first came here 6.5 years ago. Is there some better way to do it? But what I have achieved, or what we've done working with the former council president and the current council president, is we've been able to utilize these funds for other means. As an example, we use the funds for, you know better than anybody, on the charter. We were able to bring in the Collins Center. We use those line items for that. I just literally the other night talked with Councilor Rand about whether she, before we lose her here, whether we could possibly work on ordinance review, which I know is pretty important stuff. And we don't want to, we got to keep Councilor Rand around a little bit longer so we can get going with all her experience. But my vision is we may need some money within that line item to work with her and her committee on that as well. We have also in the past, as you know, through the Councilor Rotundo isn't here, but all of you passed, excuse me, new ordinances on the salary of the city clerk and the assistant city clerk. And because of the way we handled that, we were able to use that line item as well to offset that. So this year, at the close of this year, given all these things, I will not run a deficit on that, I guarantee you that. But there will not be a lot of money left over there. My instincts are next year, we'll spend probably 50 to 60% of it on my salary. I am hoping to work with Councilor Rand maybe on the ordinance stuff. And then we use that if things pop up we don't know about it. If the city clerk gets, and I am concerned about that, we've talked at great length about the elections or things of that nature, we're able, it's almost like a mini reserve if we need it. So that's what we've been doing with it, and I'm hoping, I think that's the right approach, but I don't know if that helps answer your questions.
It does, if I may. Yeah, that's really helpful. And I think I was also thinking of the ordinance review as a potential use for the coming year. I know there's also been some thought about just, is there other kind of on-demand consulting support we could get around research, or, you know, if we're proposing ordinance amendments as a council, getting some, you know, beyond the legal advice that the solicitor's office can provide, some of the kind of background policy research, whether that's something that could fit.
Sure. Great questions. And as you all know, especially you, I mean, I'm more than happy to sit with anybody, anytime, anywhere, any place. If you have some policy initiatives you're interested in, I'm more than happy to sit with you. Let's kick it around. Let's see if we can make it happen. So if there's something you're interested in, feel free. Let's sit down, and I'll buy the coffee. And let's see if we can figure out if we can find something, a direction you want to take something. More than happy to do that.
Great, thanks. And, you know, some of the other things I've been thinking about, I know we've had a council retreat at the beginning of the term, you know, being able to do that sort of like professional development as a team, and any areas that would support our work, if that's something that also kind of can fit within the 40 to 50% of this budget line that might be available for the coming year for those kind of projects.
Sure.
That's something
I mean, I know the council president, I think when she first came on board, something like that, but absolutely, we can use it for that. We can transfer it within the clerk's office without coming to the council, and all those are options to do, and I think it would be wise to consider those things, yes.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Great. Councilor St. Hilaire.
Perry, just to follow up on that, I guess, so I understand it is, the line item is required by ordinance, the amount.
I believe so, yes.
Right, and you're saying we don't spend it all because of the hours.
Well,
and I don't mind the concept of a mini reserve, so to speak, but I guess my question is, how are we deciding how those monies are spent? You know, is there a process for that, or, you know, whose decision is that?
so a couple of things. That's a great question, Councilor. First off, my predecessor, when I came on board and I did a little research here, my predecessor spent just about all of it. So I guess some of it.
I'm not passing judgment, I'm asking
No,
a
I
question.
get that. But I think some of it is the expectations. What can I get done? I think I provide you the services. If I'm missing something you do, it requires more hours, certainly we can talk about it. But, you know, I've been here now, this is my 7th budget, so I've been a while. But I got a certain rhythm, if you will, of what I think it is, at least that I can provide you. Maybe another budget analyst could come in, may need more hours, maybe less, I really don't know. So you have to give that into consideration. That said, the process, at least I've been doing with regard to any of this, I've always consulted and worked with the council president. I've had the pleasure of working for two of them. So if there is money that we want to do, let's say Council Bowen wants to do something, I always sit with the council president and say, I think we should do X. Are you okay with it? And that's how that's the process I've used since I've been here.
Okay, I didn't know there was money available, so I have a list of projects I would love to get on the agenda.
I gotta tell you, you're right. I don't bill the city for the entire appropriation. I really gave that some thought. I can tell you what I discovered when I got here. The reason it's in the ordinance halfway because there was concern, because my job is to keep an eye on the mayor and his staff and budgeting, and there was some concern that if there wasn't an ordinance in place with a specific formula in place, which we currently have, the mayor could technically come before you and zero it out and eliminate your budget analyst. So I think that's why it's there, what it is. And
yeah, again, I wasn't passing judgment on why it is or how it's
Yeah.
being used. I guess I was just unaware of it, and now I know. Thank you.
more than happy to discuss these things.
Counselor Bowen, and actually I'm going to tap you for just a moment. Having gone through the charter review, I believe the provision is in the charter, not the ordinances, correct?
Yes.
That way it can't really easily be modified. Yeah.
Yes, that is correct. And I was just going to add on, I mean, we might consider either in a finance and property meeting or at some other point, sort of jointly discussing priorities for the next fiscal year for any of those smaller projects so that we can have that discussion sort of more holistically.
Okay, thank you. Council President.
Thank you. I don't disagree with any of what we're talking about, and certainly ordinance review is top priority that I've been thinking about. I guess I would just say that from my perspective, especially going into a new fiscal year, it is true that historically our current budget analyst we have not utilized, I won't say hasn't spent, because actually the truth is we are not utilizing the current budget analyst up to the fully budgeted amount. And so I think having our priorities and having a chance to discuss them makes a lot of sense. I think just sort of stating the obvious probably, but for members of the public, the first priority, of course, would be that line item is for as much of the budget analyst time as any members of the council may need. And so if something comes up that presents more demand in any given year, I would just hate for us to sort of partial it all out to other things before we had a chance to spend it for its prescribed purpose. So being both planful and cautious, I guess.
Great. Good discussion. If there are no other questions for Mr. Perry at the moment, or
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Kent? Thank you both.
Could I just make a comment?
Yes, please.
I just wanted to comment, I also was interested, Ms. Kent, I didn't realize that your department, I do know that you license dogs. There's over 3,500 dogs in the city of Beverly, so I just wanted to comment that you do a good job keeping all the dogs in line.
Thank you. Not sure if I'm very hands-on on that, but.
I appreciate your reminders to always make sure mine is licensed, mine and everybody else's. It's a lot of dogs. We like our dogs in Beverly.
Yep.
It's true.
All right, thank you, Ms.
All
Kent.
right, thank you.
Appreciate it. Next at bat is our Veteran Service Officer, David Perrin-Chief. Good evening.
Evening, everybody.
You've, as with everyone, I give you a few moments if you would like to talk about anything in particular about your department. It obviously, you've spelled out with some detail in the digital budget book, which folks who are viewing at home or want to go to the website can take a look at and delve in. But if you'd like to say anything in particular before we start with questions, this is a moment for you to do so.
I just wanted to bring attention to, obviously our Warrior Weekend event went off really well. All the elements that came have already expressed interest. They will come back next year. So looking forward to start working with Main Streets more and, building that event as originally discussed to bring more people in town. So for the last 9 years, I think recognition should really be given to the high school band. Those kids perform at a professional level. You know, in the 9 years, they've never been late. They've always been on time. They've always performed well. So that's pretty impressive in 9 years in a row, even with COVID, that those kids have always performed without question, really admirably. But other than that, you know, what's brewing was a great help. You know, right across the street, Kevin, he got A&B Burger on. They did what they could. Obviously, the rain day, we couldn't fix that, but you know, working with Fran and the group from DPW with Touch a Truck, you know, we have a good thing going. So we're just going to keep working with her. And we're just going to keep building this each year. So expect a larger crowd next year.
Okay. Members of the subcommittee, any questions? Councilor St. Hilaire.
Fire Chief, thank you for all that you do. I thought the Warrior Weekend and the events were well done, so thank you. Question regarding your staffing. I think we've all heard about concerns about your staffing level, and I see there's an increase here to the line item for temporary help. Could you speak to your staffing and resources and whether this meets what you're looking for?
Yes, so I had a discussion with the mayor. We had a discussion with Bryant. Terry went through, he spoke with our cities and towns, and staffing at that level for a full-time person is pretty adequate. It's good pay for the work that's going to be required, the responsibility that's going to be required, and just the volume that we handle. It's going to take a lot of weight off my shoulders.
Glad to hear that. Thank you.
Council President? Other councilors? Councilor Sweeney?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and as Councilor St. Hilaire said, I thought the Warrior Weekend was a huge success, so thank you to you and all the other volunteers and members of city staff that helped put that event on. It certainly is unique in Beverly, so thank you for taking the initiative. Building off of Councilor St. Hilaire's question, I know we've talked about this, but just for those who really don't fully understand how much your department actually does, could you maybe speak to some of the specific tasks that now, going forward, having a second full-time position, you guys will be able to take on that you haven't been able to currently?
So the primary role is obviously going to be the VA benefits, getting federal funds to take care of the veterans and their families who are deserving of that. Obviously, as I mentioned in the previous meeting, pushing the issues with the PACT Act for Agent Orange and the Camp Lejeune water exposure, and my generation with the burn pits and environmental exposures. That's going to be a massive amount of work. The laws are still essentially being written. The second issue we have to adjust is that the VA is also in a level of transition, hiring staff, trying to update their systems. It's not perfect. I mean, just today there was an issue where we had a veteran, she went to a contract exam for her CMP. They said it was paid, it wasn't paid, it's about to go to collections, which can affect her ability to buy a house. We had to make phone calls to the regional office, but the regional office and the healthcare system are two separate entities, so there is no liaison for one to the other, so that's kind of where we come into play. Just knowing how the system works and being connected within it, it's, you know, getting to the right people at the federal building in Boston, then liaisoning with the people at the Bedford Hospital or the outreach facilities. So it's things like that where, you know, your typical person either in school or raising their family or working a full-time job, they don't have 2-3 hours to try and sit on the phone, disseminate this information, figure out who to talk to, get bounced around on cell phone calls, maybe get a call back later. So essentially we're troubleshooting all day, and that's just one person. So having a second person to alleviate that, so I can focus more on the details, you know, what's our budget, what can we get for more benefits, you know, what laws have changed, what's the military changing, those sort of things that I can now focus more on.
If I may, I know Mr. Perry has had a lot of interaction regarding and recommendations regarding this position, so I think it would be helpful to have a few words from him also in response to your question.
Thank you.
Position?
Okay. This is Mr. Ailes' report, but we'll leave it up here. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, if I may for a couple of minutes address the council on this matter. As the Finance and Property may recall, we had a transfer from Chapter 115E, 115 last February, I think it was. There was a lot of discussion and concerns, and the Finance and Property asked me to do a review of the Veterans Agent's Office here in Beverly and to report back to you at the appropriate time. I think tonight is the night for that. So I wanted to give you some information. First and foremost, I do recommend to the council that you appropriate the new full-time employee, FTE, at this position. I took the liberty over the winter months and into the spring to contact several other veterans offices, at least in the North Shore area, and I can report to you some of the following things and with some suggestions and recommendations above and beyond just the appropriation. City of Lynn had 3 FTEs, full-time employees, so I hope I can continue saying that. They are a much larger organization, you know, they're almost twice the size of Beverly, but certainly they had that, and they had some other minor volunteer stuff. The city of Peabody had 2 full-time employees plus another volunteer that worked for drivers, which caught my attention. They also have 2 cars over there, which I was surprised about. We don't have that. City of Salem has 2 full-time employees plus a part-time individual that works 19 hours a week for driving veterans that need services. The city of Gloucester had only, and that's a smaller operation than we have here in Beverly. They have 2 full-time employees over there that deal with these services. What I discovered in my several interviews with other communities is how they process it, and then some data or analytics I looked at. What I discovered is we are somewhat below the state average on, bear with me here, we're below the state average on what is known as VA monthly payments benefits. What's happening here is, and this is my opinion as your management analyst tonight here, is that you heard a lot about the Chapter 115 disbursements and processing of the paperwork and things of that nature. It's, from everyone I spoke to, it's virtually impossible for a city this size to have a veterans agent like Mr. Parent Chief to also be processing the 115. It just doesn't work. And one of the reasons I think we're below the state average on monthly receipts of revenues for our veterans here is because he just didn't have the resources to get the job done, consistent with what I'm hearing in all the other communities that I reached out to, and that included the town of Danvers, who is smaller than us too and has more resources there than we have here in Beverly. So what I am recommending, and I talked to Mr. Parent Chief tonight, and I briefed the chair a little bit about this too. Yes, I do believe, number one, we should appropriate the funding. Number 2, I provided Mr. Parent Chief and our Human Resource Department with a job description. That's certainly, they're not stuck by that, but it's certainly a starting point. It's my recommendation to the administration that the position be known as a administrative assistant / benefits coordinator. And that position, in my view, should be solely, among other things, responsible for the Chapter 115 processing of that paperwork. This will alleviate Mr. Parent Chief as the veterans agent. There's more money at the federal level to get for the veterans. As he alluded to a couple of minutes ago, the VA is where the real money's at, and that's where all the veterans, his peers across the Commonwealth are focusing a lot of their time to get that money. If we bring more money in, it does 2 things. Obviously, the veterans are in better shape because they get more money, and 2, it enhances the economy. We're bringing money into the city of Beverly, and as such, we're bringing more money for stores and whatever, restaurants and what have you, and I think it's good all around. So I do strongly endorse this. Everything I researched tells me this is the right approach. I will add one more thing. I did a little more homework on management within the city here. This is under community services, as we all know. The other departments in community services include the library, the recreation, council of aging, health department, of course, the veterans. And each and every one of these departments, including within recreation, I'm told, the assistant, they are in a management position. They are not in the unions. And it makes complete sense to be in a management position because you have to work with the mayor to initiate policies, to filter down through the system to make sure we achieve the things we want to do. So unfortunately, at least what I researched and found out, Mr. Parent Chief's position, and we don't want to look at it as the individual, but it's the position, he's in the union. And it's my recommendation to the administration, you really don't have control of this as city councilors, but I do believe it's responsible to me. I would recommend to the administration that we elevate the veterans position to a management role similar to all the other managers in community services that will require collective bargaining, which obviously that, it's a hurdle we got to come over. But obviously, the new position will go into the union, so I'm hoping it's a break even, and the union will see it that way. I believe elevating that brings it to the significance and importance that the veterans should and deserve to get, and I think it's the right approach to take. So, Mr. Chairman, members of the council, bottom line to it, I would recommend the appropriation of this. I hope the administration will listen to my thoughts. I see the chief of staff here. I'm sure she's typing vigorously my thoughts over there, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions anybody may have with regard to this.
Did you want to follow up? This is really sort of as much a response to your questions as anything, if you would like.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No immediate follow-up. Just thank you, Mr. Perry, for your analysis, and Mr. Parent Chief. And I know the one thing you didn't mention, but is important work, is the work you're doing on gravestone restoration and honoring the veterans of Beverly that have fought overseas and have died. And I really appreciate that work that you guys have been doing. So thank you.
Mr. Perry, before you leave, Council President, you had a question. I didn't know if you had it for Mr. Perry or Mr. Parent Chief.
Thank you. I think for either or for both, I'm just clarifying my own understanding and thinking about this. So I know this line item has been named temporary help, but it's my hope, and I think what I'm understanding is that this proposal is for a position that will not be temporary, but that we really are building into the department. That's my hope. I just want to make sure that
Correct.
that's
It's my understanding it's for a full-time employee, yes. Well, they had about a part-time position and like you say, temporary help. This is elevating a full-time person, full week, benefits, the whole thing, and will provide consistency in that office. Mr. Parent Chief, I think sometimes has to rely on volunteers to keep the place open, or he has to lock the doors. Things of that nature will not be necessary moving forward with the proper resources.
Yes, please. Go ahead.
That makes sense to me. So I'm guessing we would anticipate in next year's budget seeing this as a line item that's administrative assistant or whatever the job title is, as opposed to this temporary helps kind of a holdover. But we're really building this in for the future. I guess this might be.
I'll let the finance director handle that one.
So what we'll do is, if this budget's approved, is we'll actually pull that out during this budget year and pull a full-time line and leave. There is a little bit of funding remaining in this line for temporary help for some additional work and support that Mr. Parent Chief may need. But yeah, we'll make that change.
If you, again, I'm not sure which, but I'll just sort of follow up to that. So there'd be the anticipated staffing would be 2 full-time positions plus a smaller part-time position as well that's funded? Or is it just
So it's
the 2?
Mr. Parent Chief, the new position,
Yeah.
whatever it's to be named, and then in addition to that, there's $10,000 in this line. Estimate, I mean, we haven't posted the position, we don't know the exact salary range, but that was the intent when we built the line at the 67.5 level, that it included a full-time position plus 10,000 in kind of ad hoc temporary support as Mr. Parent Chief sees fit.
And that's my question, which is, what exactly does Mr. Parent Chief have in mind for the duties, if you will, of whatever that $10,000 is expended for?
Yeah. So,
Thank you.
understanding this, so when, again, I discussed with Brian, so as in the military, we have a rule, 2 is 1, 1 is none. So I believe that once we have a full-time staff member at the current budget that is set at the 67, the temporary line wouldn't be needed, because if someone's going to come in to handle as much responsibility as I take on, or the extra responsibility when I'm not there, that 67 really should be what their salary is going to be, or what their pay is going to be. And then that 10 can get rolled into that, and it's just me and the number 2, whoever is going to be with me. Because we'll now have it balanced. Again, that's a little bit more discussion with Brian and I. Looking at this, because he's got to change, remove lines, but the way I see it, it would just be myself and the AVSO or the secondary.
Okay, all right. Thank you. I understand it's sort of still further discussions because the position is being still crafted. Thank you. Members, Councilor Rand.
Thank you. I wanted to ask Mr. Parent Chief, first of all, thank you for your vision in the Warriors Weekend, and I know that's going to grow over the years, and I'm excited to be more involved with that. But I wanted to ask you, for the line item for the veterans benefits, which is different from the federal money that the Chapter 115 money that we were just talking about, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm looking at the veterans benefits line item, which is money that we pay out, but the state reimburses us at 75%. Can you tell me how many veterans are represented by that?
44.
44, okay, perfect. And then a follow-up question?
Go ahead.
And this is sort of, it's a little bit of a twist on what Mr. Perry was saying, and I do understand that you'll have better and more capacity with a second employee, second staff member to join you, but I just wanted to say that I can see by these numbers in the state benefit line item that you're helping veterans to get, that it's increased over time, and that to me is a direct correlation of the work you're putting into that. So I wanted to say that yes, more capacity is better, but what you're doing is clearly, maximizing benefits for those 44 veterans, so thank you. And if you have any comments on that line item, I'd be happy to hear them as well.
I mean, I believe that line item has been explained thoroughly, so I don't really need to get into that anymore.
Thanks.
Okay, Counselor Bowen.
Thank you. I did just want to follow up. I know we had a extensive conversation in February about how that line item works, but just given sort of how it appears in the budget book, wanted to just clarify. So the overall budget for the department wouldn't really change from this current fiscal year to the next fiscal year, but would allow for that additional staffing by taking just a more sort of closer budgeting approach to that benefits line, to sort of where we've been trending rather than the more conservative approach we had taken before, but with the understanding that if the benefits claims are higher, the city is required to find that funding and would do so, but that it's just sort of a
Yes.
realignment within the department.
So what I do, if I have somebody come in who's eligible for Chapter 115, the first thing I do is start chasing down if they're eligible for federal benefits. So one of the biggest misconceptions is that everyone's eligible for federal benefits. That is not true, but a lot more people are eligible for state benefits. So depending on the way the state rules it is, it's kind of like the same rules as the VA. The amount of time in service, what you did for service, what your discharge reasons were. But then you get into caveats where the authorizers in the state can make an administrative decision on if someone should be eligible for benefits due to an extenuating circumstance. If the veteran was in for a certain amount of time but got hurt but couldn't get an honorable discharge because of a medical reason, or they had to do an administrative separation, there's reasons for that, and then we'd have to look into it. The second part of it is that all of you understand healthcare is a little tricky, and anything federal is a little tricky. So by Bryant level funding this, we give ourselves a massive safety net for that what-if contingency. As you've seen every year since I've come on, we're always giving a sizable portion back, and then obviously the state's reimbursing at the 75% because we're staying within compliance. So with that plus being able to focus more on the federal, I pretty much see this budget line not really having to move, and then the city being able to recoup at the end of every year. So.
Yes, Counselor Crawley.
Thank you. Dave, I just want to, hats off to everything that you've been doing so far for all of our veterans, with myself being a veteran also, with the city and on the council. It's nice to see you having the second person finally, as far as getting this through, because I think that's going to open up a lot more doors. We've had several conversations as far as your hands have been tied because you can only do so much because you only have so many hours in a day to be able to do some things, and you've done some remarkable work so far, especially pulling off this Warrior Weekend, and I think there's a lot of things to continue with that. So hats off there, and I look forward to once we get the second person on and freeing you up some more time to continue to find some things for our veterans. Thanks.
I think my wife is definitely looking forward to me not bringing my phone on vacation.
She might like to have you home too, so.
Yeah, that too.
Any other questions for Mr. Parent Chief? Thank you very much. Pleasure to have you here. Thank you for the work you do.
Have a good evening.
Next up is our library director, Allison Babbitt. Good evening.
Good evening, counselors.
You've been sitting through this, so you sort of know the routine. Are there any things you'd like to say? You have a pretty thorough narrative in the digital budget book, but if there's anything you'd like to say in particular before we start on
If you
questions?
don't mind, I would love to use the opportunity to just tell you a little bit about the library and a little bit about the proposals. Thank you for this opportunity to present the budget. And I would like to recognize Kevin O'Reilly, who is the chair of our trustees, here in support of this budget request and all the work that the library does. This proposed budget will allow us to fulfill our mission of providing services, programs, and materials that enrich people's lives, foster a love of reading, and provide access to information for residents of all ages. As you know, the library operates 3 service points: the main library, which is open 68 hours per week, the Farms branch, which is open 53 hours a week, as well as our bookmobile, which visits over 80 locations on a 3-week rotation. The library's dedicated staff is committed to delivering high-quality service and innovating new programs and offerings each year. To make this possible, we continuously invest in our staff, having devoted over 130 hours of professional development this year. Annually, we offer over 600 programs for people of all ages, which would not be possible without the generous support of our Friends of the Library groups. And so far this fiscal year, we have logged over 157,000 visits from the public to our 2 buildings and circulated over 326,000 physical items. Beverly patrons have also borrowed over 54,000 ebooks and audiobooks on our Overdrive platform alone so far this year. In addition to the FY23 highlights that I put in the ClearGov budget book, I also wanted to mention that recently our assistant library director organized our inaugural local author fair, which we had approximately 200 people attend. Our head of teen services developed an amazing author series in partnership with Copper Dog Books, featuring such authors as Kyle Luckoff, Rajani LaRocca, and Mark Hoffman. We have continued our partnerships with organizations such as the Heathmere Center to bring living room conversations on a variety of topics, ranging from diversity to electric vehicles. And we continue to partner with the Zen Center North Shore for weekly meditation sessions. I'm also really excited to share that we have just started our strategic planning process. We do this on a 5-year cycle, and as part of this, we have begun work with a committee of folks with varying roles who wear multiple hats. A couple names you'll probably know: Wangari Fahari is on our committee, Lindsay Barth from Beverly Main Streets, and 10 other great people in the community. Additional milestones in that process will include staff workshops, various conversations, and a large survey. The plan will be written and submitted to the state by October 1st, and if I have the opportunity, I would love to present that to you when it's done as well. I also wanted to invite you to 2 great events that we have coming up. So this Saturday, June 3rd, we have our Farms Lawn Party. Unfortunately, the weather's looking a little iffy, so it may come mostly inside to the branch. It will go on, rain or shine, but we can only have the dog beauty contest. I hear there's 3,500 dogs in Beverly. That can only happen if it's nice weather. And then on Wednesday, June 14th, from 6:30 to 8 p.m., we have our summer reading kickoff on the Common. We had approximately 600 people attend last year. We would love to have you come as well. There will be a DJ, free snacks, lawn games, and everyone can sign up for summer reading. That will also be the first night that you can check out our story walk, which is 19 custom signs that we set up around the Common, and then it also travels around the city. This year we'll be featuring the beautiful children's book called Fry Bread, written by Kevin Noble Maillard and illustrated by Juana Martinez Neal. These events and all of our amazing upcoming summer programs are fully detailed in this booklet, which may have already hit your mailboxes. If not, it should soon. And it's also available in both buildings for the public to pick up as well. We have tons of great things planned this summer, and I would love for you and all members of our community to participate. I could go on, but I'll end it there. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have about the budget proposal.
Thank you very much. Your enthusiasm is quite contagious. So
Thank you.
and evident. Members of the subcommittee,
I
Councilor
had no real
St. Hilaire.
questions, but just a comment. I think the library does amazing work, and the programs and events are always really well done. And my Puggle Boomer will be participating this weekend in the documentary. So looking forward to the event. Thank you.
Thank you.
Council President.
Thank you. Similar to Councilor St. Hilaire, I actually don't have a question for you, Ms. Babin. I feel like your narrative, both written and verbal, is always very thorough. I always say you can always tell the library's presentation was worked on by librarians because it's well sourced and well cited.
Thank you.
And I appreciate it very much. But I did just want to also offer a comment. I really appreciate sort of the breadth of creativity that you and your team have brought to what a public library is and can be. I know in the beginning of your narrative you talk about it being a place, a forum for all points of view. It adheres to principles of intellectual freedom and the ways that it really offers this access without restriction by fees, censorship, language, or difference of ability. And as a city, of course, we've been thinking a lot about diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and I just wanted to mention I appreciate the library, I think, has been thinking about those topics all along, you and your team. The elimination of fees is such an access issue, and so just wanted to thank you for that, and thank you also for the creative work around things like the Library of Things and the ways that you're also thinking about sustainability and how we can circulate not just books but items so that people don't need to be consuming as much, we can share. So just a thank you for the creativity you and your staff bring.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate that.
Councilor Rand.
Thank you so much. First of all, I love the book Fry Bread, so I'm excited to see that come alive on the commons, right?
It will start on the common, yes.
Okay, perfect.
Starting on the 14th.
Okay. And then also I saw someone buying lemonade for the event on Saturday today at the store. So the library is everywhere when you least expect it. I do have one question about your collections and the line item that you purchased new items for. I know that that's sort of almost like a state regulation.
Yes.
That funded amount. But I'm just very curious. First of all, I noticed in your notes that you wrote additional funding sources will supplement that line item. I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit more about that, and also out of curiosity about how many new books does that mean a year? I see it covers subscriptions and books, but I just would love a number.
That's a great question. I can definitely answer the first part in detail. Okay. The number I don't have off the top of my head. I would have to get that for you. So I was asked by the administration to tighten up the budget request a bit this year, and admittedly, the library runs a tight ship. There really isn't a lot of fat on this budget. Everything in here is pretty to the letter. One place we did have some flexibility is the book line. That said, we will need to spend $290,000 on materials for the library, and that will be achieved. We will make up that gap of about $17,000 through a combination of state aid and trust funds.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Thank you very much. And I guess follow-up, are the trust funds established already? They're part of the library?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and I work with Brian every year to closely monitor how we spend the income generated by them so that we never spend too much. And they have different restrictions on the different trust funds, and the trustees help oversee that as well.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Other councilors' questions? Councilor Bowen.
Thank you. Slightly beyond, it's not a budget line here, but I'm curious for any updates on the HVAC plans and how that might be impacting the collections or the people in the buildings.
Sure.
Maybe because it's like 85 degrees in here right now that I'm thinking of it.
So it can be warm in our building as well. At this time, engineering firm is still working on the design process. So we don't have any physical improvements in the building yet. That will be coming. We're fortunate that the one rooftop unit we have that still works is still working at this time. We have two, one is no longer functioning. So we're just kind of hanging in there for now while they continue to design it and looking forward to it kicking off. Thank you.
Any other counselors? Counselor Crawley?
Sure. I just want to say thank you for everything that you guys are doing as far as at the library goes. I guess more specifically for my ward and down on Holcroft and down in that area where people have some problems with transportation and stuff. They love the bookmobile. So if we can get more down there, that would be great. I think it's a great resource, and we appreciate it very much. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
I just have a couple of quick comments. One is, although my sister is no longer here in town, she always used the bookmobile, and it's a wonderful resource for the community. So it's just terrific to have that as a continuing resource. And also, in terms of continuing resources, and I should have perhaps mentioned this with some of the other department heads, our volunteers like Mr. O'Reilly and all the other members of the various boards and commissions in the town, thank you very much for the service you give. The city really would not function without the multitude of volunteers we have, so thank you very much as well, and by extension to the other commissions and board volunteers. So if there are no other questions or comments, thank you, and good evening. You're welcome to stay, but you, of course, need not to.
Thank you very much.
So good evening, and thanks for coming. Mr. Butler, our new Commissioner, Special Services Commissioner. Good evening.
Good evening, councilors. I've conversed with a few of you via emails, but first time meeting you all.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you here. I worked on the Zoning Board of Appeals as a volunteer for 16 years and dealt with a series of folks in your position, and most recently with Steve Frederickson.
Yep.
So it's great to see you here and have an opportunity to meet you in person. The work you do is really important for the city, as well as the residents who have to walk in and walk out of your office for looking for services. So thank you.
Thank you.
You're relatively new here. Is there anything in particular that you would like to say to the council before we sort of turn to questions?
Just that, basically my supervisor staff, we have 10 people in our department. When fully staffed, we have 2 full-time building inspectors and 1 part-time, and myself. 3 administrative clerks and a part-time zoning board administrative, and a sealers and weights and measure, along with electrical inspector and a plumbing inspector. You'll see when I first started here, we had no sealers and weights person. We finally filled that position in late February. We've kind of been going through some changes. We've had some turnover. We lost an administrative clerk. She left in January. We filled that position in March. We just recently lost the plumbing inspector left, went to another position in the city. We have filled that position, so we're almost fully staffed. We're down 1 local inspector at this point in time.
Okay, well, it's a challenging environment for anyone who's trying to hire people, that is for sure.
Yes, yeah, and like I think Darlene mentioned, we've put it, the job has been advertised. We're just waiting to, maybe for that wage comparison to come out a little bit down the road here and see if we can get some feelers from it.
Okay, good. Without further ado, members of the subcommittee, Councilor St. Hilaire.
I just want to say, good to meet you in person. I know I've probably been one of the ones emailing you back and forth, so I appreciate your responsiveness and follow-up on all those items, and appreciate, your description here. I have no questions on your budget.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Council President?
Thank you. Just one quick one, I
Sure.
think. And again, thank you. Nice to meet you in person. I know you and I have also emailed back
Yeah.
and forth, so it's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I was just curious if you could talk just a little bit about the temporary help line item in your budget and what work or what kind of position is covered or anticipated to be covered.
So
under
that falls under the electrical and the plumbing. They each have a part-time line item. So we lost our plumbing inspector, I want to say in end of January, so we had to fill that need. So we had a person working part-time coming in like 3 days a week. So that's why that kind of went up. Electrical inspector, I'm not sure what kind of went on with him. He kind of went up, he took a little more time off than is normal. I'm not sure exactly what went on there, but that's why that line item was up dramatically. So that will change. He's not going to be doing that anymore.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Other councilors with questions? Councilor Crowley?
I just want to echo the same thing. Thank you for some of the work you've been helping me in as far as Ward 3, and it's nice to finally meet you, and welcome to Beverly.
Thank you. We're making some headway on that, I think.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I've had some communication and stuff, and the neighbors are happy, so
Right.
this is good. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Councilor Rand?
I guess I just feel really lucky that we recently emailed as early as this morning, so thank you. I figured I'd share in the
I think of 3 of you guys this
celebration.
morning.
Yeah.
I was like, are they trying to tell me something?
So thank you for your help and welcome.
Thank you.
Other than many welcomes to Mr. Butler, any other questions or comments for him this evening? I think you're off to a great start.
Great. Thank you very much.
Nice to meet you in person.
Nice meeting you all.
Thanks for coming in. Appreciate it. Next, for the Council of Aging, Director Christopher Gomez Farewell. Good evening. And also a relatively new face
Yes.
here in Beverly, and you have a few, take a few minutes if you'd like to introduce yourself or say a few words before we jump into questions.
Yeah, it's very nice to meet most of you in person for the first time, and I'm very happy to be here. So at the Senior Center, we offer a litany of services and programming, and today's day and age, a lot of our work is social work. There's a lot of needs in the community, especially post-pandemic, and we do a lot of fun events as well. I've seen Councilor Sweeney, I think, at a couple events, and we just want to provide the most things we can to Beverly senior community and make it a one-stop shop, so to speak, so seniors can go to a senior center and do everything they have to do there instead of having to go to many different places. And transportation access is very difficult, especially for seniors. So we pride ourselves in trying to have as many things we can as the senior center can possibly hold. And that's pretty much it.
Okay, yeah, it's interesting to note, it always is surprising to me, I think the latest statistics we have is that 25% of Beverly's population out of 42,000 are 60 or older, all of whom qualify for senior center services. So it's an important piece of the fabric of our city services in our community, so thank you. Questions from members of the subcommittee? Councilors, Councilor Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Gomez Farewell, for being here. And it's good to have you on board and a few months into the role. And obviously, the COA does very important work in community building in Beverly, and that was really evident both during the pandemic, but then the work that you all did coming out of the pandemic. So I had a handful of conversations with your predecessor about some of the good and the bad of the state of the COA over the past couple of years coming out of the pandemic, and would be interested to hear from you now that you've been on the job for a few months as to what you see as the biggest strengths and weaknesses with the current state of the COA, as well as some opportunities that you're hoping to capitalize on in this coming year.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for the question, Councilor. I would think some of the biggest strengths is the infrastructure. I feel the building is very beautiful, very nice building, very well kept. And the staff, we have a great staff, and they're very hardworking, and they're open to change and trying new things, which can sometimes be a little difficult when someone new comes on board. But we've hit the ground running, and everyone's been really excited to add new programming and services. And some of the weaknesses, I would say when I started, I noticed the transportation department was really it was running kind of quite inefficiently. Like 3 vans would show up in one building to pick up different people, but I think there's no need for that, especially when one person would suffice. And there wasn't much outings going on into the community, which we've changed completely. We're doing a lot of trips. The seniors are really excited. We're doing casino trips, again, beach trips, restaurant trips. In the last 3 months, attendance has gone up 20%, so we're really excited. And like the chair said, it's a great opportunity. We have 11,000 seniors, almost 11,100 seniors in Beverly. It's a great opportunity. I think there's definitely an opportunity to grow more. We're trying to go out into the community and meeting the seniors where they're at. We want to get the younger seniors in. We're trying to offer programming and services and stuff that attract younger seniors. There's still a stigma of the senior center, and I'm not old, I don't want to go, so we try to do more fun activities and while still engaging our older seniors as well. So it's a balance that we try to hold. And we recently started like a senior center tour where we go to different senior housing and we tell them what programming and services we have available, and the feedback's been really good. Eventually, we hope to get to all the senior housing. I think there's also an opportunity for us to work more with the other departments within the city. In my previous job, I would have all the departments come in and do presentations on what they offer, and we would work on things to streamline things for seniors. So, for example, instead of having to go to the city clerk to apply for certain things, if they can do it at the senior center and we can help them, why not? So I think we could definitely work on that a little bit. And I think we could definitely attract a more diverse set of seniors into the senior center. So I myself speak Spanish fluently, and we've announced that on the newsletter. We speak Spanish now. When you see that, that means me. So I go out into the community quite frequently myself, and I try to bring more seniors in. And if it was up to me, we would have all 11,000 seniors in the senior center every day, and hopefully we'll continue to bring the numbers up and keep up the good work.
Thank you. I really appreciate that insight. And another question I have, a lot of folks don't realize this, but you guys are often the front door, essentially, at the local level in connecting folks with services at the state level regarding housing security or food insecurity needs. I know those were 2 big areas of focus in the pandemic and the immediate aftermath of the pandemic. Now that we're a few years removed, there's still some lingering effects, but given that few years from the start of the pandemic now, are you guys still seeing that increased activity in terms of folks seeking, whether it's rental assistance or any sort of food assistance from the state level that you guys have been helping with for applications?
Yeah, our social work and outreach work is probably, our social work and outreach coordinator, 75% of their work, I would say, is housing assistance and food insecurity assistance. And I expect the food assistance to go up. SNAP benefits are getting cut again after the end of this month, so they'll go back to pre-pandemic amounts, which is always tough, especially for seniors on fixed income. And they were used to getting a certain amount of money, and now it's being cut again. So I expect it to go up, and they do a great job. And a lot of our job is social work for the most part, and I'm just happy that we're there to help people, because sometimes they would be lost without coming to us.
Mm-hmm. It's an important service you guys provide, so thank you for all the work that you do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, and I've worked many times with your predecessor on social service related matters, so I know that the role that Senior Center plays in that respect is particularly valuable and needed for those who are in need. So, other councilors have any questions for Councilor Rand?
Thank you. Mine's just sort of get to know the senior center and you kind of question. What's your favorite activity that the seniors are engaged in at the senior center? So not a trip, but what's happening in the center that's bringing joy?
There's so many. So we brought the big band back. That was a big hit before, and it kind of had stopped for a while, so we brought the big band back. Our yoga classes are a big hit. I myself teach a dominoes class, and the seniors love it. We do it Monday mornings. I would say our big events too, like our Mother's Day event was great. I say I like them all pretty much, but the seniors seem to love yoga the most, and Tai Chi. Tai Chi's a big hit, and the big band. They love dancing to the live band.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
I can't wait to, well, I can wait, but it sounds like so much fun.
Your time will come. Your time
Yeah,
will come.
one day at a time, but it sounds like fun, so.
Council President.
Thank you. Thank you. It's nice to get to know you a little bit better, and I definitely appreciate all the work the Senior Center has done and is doing, including, I know you've continued the grant-funded program, the Walk in the Woods program, and that's a great opportunity and a way to really think creatively about bringing additional funding in and getting seniors outside and walking. So thank you for the invitation. It was great to join the seniors on one of those. I was interested, my question for you is going to be about thinking about how to increase access for a more diverse group of seniors. You touched on that, and so that just raised my curiosity. Do you have thoughts about, I think it's wonderful that you yourself can speak Spanish, and now you can say to seniors, you know, we speak Spanish at the Senior Center. Do you have thoughts about continuing to expand access in other languages, how that might happen, particularly with social service work that you're doing? Forms, translation, access points for seniors, or even expanding ability for more Spanish-speaking staff than just yourself, so it's not just dependent on you being in the building, but I'm just curious your thoughts on that.
So we ordered 2 of the iPads, the translating iPads. They should be coming in any day now. And we hope to work with Wangari on, language access. I know Beverly has a big Albanian community as well. So we also plan on doing every month is like a different culture. We'll highlight a different culture and do it a big event with their music and food and dances of that culture to kind of entice people to come in and just feel comfortable. We want to be a very inclusive and accepting space and a safe space for everyone. I feel like if you don't feel like you belong in a space, you're not going to go. So, the staff is very welcoming and everyone meets you with a happy face, and we just hope to be just a big happy space.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and definitely supportive of that work in any way that we can support your efforts on that front as well.
Thank you.
Terrific. Councilor Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a budgetary question for Mr. Ailes. I see a pretty sizable increase in the salary of the director, and Ms. Wynn actually mentioned it a little bit when talking about her department and some of their salaries, the work that the city's been doing in terms of comparing salaries to those of comparable communities and adjusting them as necessary. Could you talk specifically about the driving factors behind this increase for the COA director, but then maybe a little more generally about what your office and the mayor's office did when evaluating salaries and preparing the numbers in front of us in this budget?
Sure, that's a great question, and you may see that in other areas of the budget as we go through, because there has been some staffing turnover, not just within departments, but at the leadership level within the administration as well. Mr. Gomez-Farrell, good example. Ms. Delakai, who is not here tonight, but will review the health budget later. It's really market-driven. I mean, when we have a vacancy in a critical position, whether that's a direct report to the mayor or a large department head like the COA, we do a salary survey. It's one of the first things we do. We look at our comparable communities. We look at what any other vacant positions in other municipalities might be looking for, because we want to attract talent. And I think we've been successful in that. Case in point, to my right, Ms. Delakai is wonderful if you haven't had a chance to meet her. And we've had some other staff turnover, and everyone's really kind of been a welcomed addition to what it is we're all trying to do as a community here. So, it's a combination of a bunch of things: market, comparable communities what's available and where some positions may be more in demand than others. For example, the assessors department, for example, there's a really a crunch in the Commonwealth for good qualified assessors. So in that case, that may dictate a higher salary to try to attract someone to come to Beverly and want to be part of our team. Is that helpful?
Yes, that's helpful. Good to hear. And, I'm sure you're doing it already, but certainly want to encourage you to continue that constant evaluation so that we don't lose department heads to some of these other communities. So thank you for your response.
All set?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Counselor Bowen?
Thank you. Not too much to add. The same thanks and congrats on maintaining both the fun programming side and the important social services, social work side through really interesting times. I just wanted to ask a little bit more about the transportation department. I know you probably heard us talking earlier with the planning department about last mile transportation in the city for everyone. And I think sometimes we think about, the cost is so high, but I think the senior center's transportation capacity is really a good example of the value that we get for that money. And it's great to hear you're working on squeezing even more value out of the same money. But I was hoping you could just say a little bit more about what that enables in the city for people with limited mobility, limited transportation options, and sort of how we benefit as a city from providing that service.
Well, quite frankly, it's like a lifeline, I would say, for a lot of our seniors, because without this transportation, they wouldn't be able to get to the senior center and get a free meal or engage with their friends or, get any of these services. We've added a lot of new services, a podiatrist, nail techs go there. We have massage therapists that come in. I think without our transportation, we bring them to doctor's appointments, we bring them food shopping. Quite frankly, I don't know what they would do without it. And they're so thankful. Our transportation coordinator, we recently hired a new one. The position was vacant for quite some time, and they're so excited and they're so thankful. It's really, it's like a blessing. You feel so good helping people, and yeah, I think it's godsend that we're able to help them, and we're really happy to do it.
Terrific. Any other questions or comments? Go ahead, Mr. Ailes.
But I do just want to point out, Mr. Chair, you might have been ready to do this, but I just wanted to note that Mr. Gomez-Farwell is also oversees one of the enterprise funds. So in terms of reviewing the budget, we focused mostly on the general fund, but under the fund summaries tab, there is a senior center enterprise fund. It's a bit, it's one of the smaller ones, but I just wanted to point that out because if you have any questions related to that, you should, now would probably be.
Yeah, and you and I talked about that a bit today as well. Yeah, so certainly, if you would like to speak to it, or Mr. Ailes, either one of you, in terms of what's in the enterprise fund, how it's specifically used, the amount of the retained earnings, and so forth.
So most of all our activities go through the enterprise fund. If you'll see, there's some that weren't used. My predecessor didn't want to do that, so that activity, so it was never touched. But most of our activities go through the enterprise fund, and yeah, the senior day in the park is probably our big event that's in the enterprise fund. Yeah. And we usually, previous years, we usually end up even, or we make a little bit of money, but not much, or we lose a little bit. So it's not, that's pretty much it.
Okay.
I don't know.
So, and Chris kind of said this, but this is basically the ability for the senior center and Chris's team to organize these events, collect very modest fees, basically at cost for bus trips to events, for food for events, for these different types of activities that they're using as engagement tools and retention tools for the people they're trying to serve. So that's basically the focus of it.
Okay, and if you, before you leave, where do you, what is the balance? Perhaps we can bring it up on the screen, and the percentage of retained earnings in it.
I can help you. I'm assuming you're talking about the certified retained earnings.
Yes.
We had $248,538 certified by the Department of Revenue this past November, I believe it was. And in terms of this budget here, the administration is proposing that $93,373 be taken of that amount to augment the enterprise fund. So there's sufficient funds to do that, and I would recommend its adoption.
Okay, thank you. Councilors, any question? Councilor Rand.
Thanks so much. I just had one question about the enterprise fund, and that's the debt service line. I'm just curious of why the increase in the transfer to the general fund from that line item?
I'm sorry, man.
Increase from past years to this year.
With your indulgence, Counselor, may I correct what I just said?
Absolutely.
My apologies. I read the Recreation Department. I guess Mr. Doig is all of a sudden, you know, what is he doing up there, you know? I'm a senior citizen myself. Maybe this is part of my problem. My apologies. To answer the question properly, Mr. Chairman, on the senior citizens, we certified $61,590. Again, my apologies. Of which the administration is proposing that $40,950 be used. Of those retained earnings, there's sufficient funds, and again, I would recommend its adoption. And my apologies for my mistake.
Apology accepted. But in answer to Councilor Rand's question.
Yeah, should I repeat that question?
Yes, why don't you go ahead and repeat the question.
I'm curious about the debt service line item and the increase from the past few years. What?
Debt service?
Yeah, it's interesting, the transfer under debt service for the enterprise fund, the transfer to general fund is just much higher than it has been in the past. It seems like it's to cover general debt service for the city. Is that accurate?
No, let's look at the line together, because I want to make sure I'm understanding what so the $1,086?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a product of a process we do every year where we go through all of the expenses throughout the city, particularly those departments that provide a central service to other departments. And we allocate out those costs based on usage, for lack of a better term. And this is the Senior Center Enterprise Fund's portion of the costs associated with the IT department, any employee benefits, which isn't relevant in this fund, but it's relevant in others, the finance department, the mayor's office, the council's salaries, things, because you all hear things and act on things that may affect this enterprise fund, and therefore a portion of your costs get attributed to these enterprise funds as a mechanism to claw back the costs that are absorbed within the general fund.
Okay.
These are the transfers for indirect costs?
Yep, indirect costs, yep.
Yeah. Councilor Rand.
Just one follow-up question, and I know it's a small amount of money, but I think it's a good point for me to understand. Is that increase a matter of, you know, the overall budget increase, or is it a matter of this particular department sort of paying a higher percentage?
It's different per cost center. So
Okay.
this budget of $62,000 compared to the overall city budget of all departments is relevant when we look at allocating costs such as procurement or the accounting department, because those activities within those departments are driven by the volume and the amounts of budgets that are being processed and spending that's occurring. So those are the drivers for those cost centers. But something like IT, it would have to do with how many devices are deployed in support of this, which the answer is 0 for this fund. But for something like the water fund, there might be computers and mobile devices that are deployed there. So the IT costs would be allocated out based on that cost driver. And so it really depends on what type of central service indirect charge you're looking to allocate out.
Okay.
There's like a whole science behind it and methodologies, and it's done at all government levels to properly articulate the true cost of operating a service.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Any other questions? We're on a good run there. I guess we're all set. Pleasure to meet you in person, and again, thank you for the service. And it's clear you love the position and love the work you're doing, and it's important. So thank you very much, and thank you for coming this evening.
Nice to meet you all. Have a great night.
You bet. The next item, sort of spelled out on the agenda, is the Health Director, Laura Delakai, who is recently employed by the city, but due to previous obligations is not able to be here. So the way we'll be handling this review in this process is Mr. Ailes and or Mr. Doig will speak to this generally, and Mr. Ailes maybe particularly if you have special budget-related questions. And then Ms. Delakai will come in person, so we'll have a chance to meet her and ask her specifically about her own vision and programming. The evening of Monday, June 12th, she will be here and appear before us right before Dr. Trochek comes in and gives the school department budget. So without further ado, I leave it to Mr. Doig and Mr. Ailes to decide how they want to sort of divide up talking about this in her absence.
Well, again, the budget.
And good evening, Mr. Doig.
Oh, I'm sorry, good evening. Thank you very much for having us here. So for the health department, I just want to let everybody know we are back to fully staffed. They were down a couple of inspectors. Laura did a great job hitting the ground running, finding a couple new people. And so we're fully staffed for the first time in a long time over there. She's been doing a great job getting to know the community, getting out and talking with a lot of the businesses, and dealing with several issues around the town that she had to deal with regarding just different health department issues. So again, she's done an amazing job, but the department is fully staffed again. So the line items for budget, for salaries are being used. And other than that, I don't think there's a lot of change in the budget. Nothing new, really, but again, they're doing a great job, continuing to do a great job, so.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ailes, is there anything specific you want to say about the budget itself, short of, questions from the counselors or meeting Ms. Delakai when she comes in?
No, I mean, there are a few areas that you'll note that Ms. Delakai advocated for certain adjustments to, particularly around some training and seminars and costs for things of that nature. Overall, I would just suggest she spent a tremendous amount of effort in articulating within the digital budget book the goals, the organizational structure, all the important things that help to understand everything that the health department does, because it's quite a lot actually, and you don't realize how much activity actually flows through that department. But if you have specific questions about line items, spending, year over year adjustments, we're here to answer. So.
Okay, thank you. Council President.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify my own understanding. I hear Mr. Doig saying the department is fully staffed, which is wonderful. I did note that one of the goals that were articulated was to hire additional full-time sanitarian. So I'm assuming, I want to make sure I'm right, the increase in the sanitarian line item reflects that there is a sanitarian working, so it's fully staffed, but that there would be two. Is the goal to have two? Is that the reason for the jump from 70,000s to the 151,000?
So within the general fund, there has historically always been, with the exception of a couple of years, 2 full-time sanitarians staffed through this department. And there was a turnover and we weren't able to hire, so we brought in some temporary help to kind of fill the gap for a little while. This year, we have 2 full-time sanitarians on staff in the general fund. In addition to that, there's a sanitarian that will hit the ARPA fund for the near future to help kind of push that workload and get the workload under control. So you see it here in the place of, I think it's the sanitarian line, and then right above it, you see a line that's zeroed out that was formerly a staff line. That is what moved down to the sanitation line for a full-time hire.
Thank you. Can I just ask a follow-up? Just, so her goal to hire an additional sanitarian, that is the ARPA-funded sanitarian, or has that goal already been met? That's what I guess I'm trying to figure out. Has she met that goal already, or there's an
got someone?
additional
Yeah.
hire to come?
Yes, they just, somebody just started a couple weeks ago, so, or a few weeks ago, so they're fully, all three sanitarians working.
Great, she can check that goal right off. Thank you. I appreciate that, that's helpful.
Councilor Hilaire, anything? Okay.
Good, thank you.
Other members of the council? Again, Ms. Delakai will be coming in before us, so I'll have a chance to speak with her on Monday, June 12th as well, when we go through this. Any questions? Hearing none. I think that I would only comment that it's, we only learned, I think in the past, the health department has sort of been very much in the background of people's lives as they go through, ordinary living. But we certainly learned during COVID that the health department is very front and center in our lives without us really realizing it, and it's a very important position. So I'm glad to see that we are fully staffed, have a new director, and as you said, Mr. Joy is hitting the ground running. So all good news. We can move directly, I guess, then to Mr. Aguirre, your discussion and for the council on Parks and Recreation generally, and also the Enterprise Fund.
Well, again, I'd like to start off just by going through some of the community service department heads. I've been very fortunate to hire two brand new department heads who are fantastic. I think you've been impressed, well, you'll be impressed with Laura as well, but impressed with Allison over the years. David has been around for 10 years and has done a tremendous job. He started around the same time that I became the community services director. But I can say that they're all very hardworking, put in more than the effort necessary to do the job and do whatever it takes to get the job done. So again, I've been very fortunate in that regard, and we were very lucky to find two brand new directors who are just amazing so far. So, again, Laura has a lot of experience in public health. Chris came from Lynn, where he started a department from scratch. And the thing that impressed me the most about him when we interviewed him was that he talked a lot about his grandmother and how he was very close with his grandmother and wanting to see her get services and things. And that's the passion and the attitude he's carried forward to here in Beverly. So to answer the question about diversity, that's one of the things we talked about during the interviewing. And, having transportation go to areas of downtown Beverly on a regular basis to pick people up and bring them to the senior center. I'm sure there are people who live in Ward 3 and other areas that don't even know we have a senior center or what happens there. So as Chris said, he's doing outreach, and we're, as a group, trying to reach out more to our citizens, let them know what we're doing. So, again, I'm very blessed to have them on board and working hard and doing a great job. Excuse me, within recreation, this is my 20th year with the city, my 21st budget review. 20 years ago in this room, they cut my budget in half and took $184,000 out of our enterprise fund. And yet, in the last 20 years, we've been able to rebuild or replenish all 28 playgrounds in the city. Excuse me, we've significantly increased our programming. And actually, at the time, there were only 4 full-time staff members. Jocelyn, who just left, worked with us for 18 years, did an amazing job helping to grow the department. But I've been blessed with great staff for all that time. Jocelyn, obviously, 18 years. Jean Belanger, been with us for over 35 years in total, between working as a counselor all the way through to now as our registrar. And I can never go without saying Gail Carmody has been with us for 54 years. Started with the rec department in 1969 and has never left. So it's amazing. And again, they all, including the new directors, excuse me, make my job very easy. So I work with great people, and even our part-time staff are great kids, great people, and work very hard. So having said all that, I'm open to questions about the budget or our programs.
Okay. questions? Yeah, Councilor St. Hilaire.
Again, I don't necessarily have specific questions, but I just wanted to say the fields are looking really, really good. I don't know whose responsibility that is, but as the department head, I just wanted to say that stands out this spring in particular. And appreciate all the work that you're doing on the parks and being responsive to the constituent needs there as well. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Well, I have to give the credit to Department of Public Services. I get a lot of compliments on things that they do, but I am willing to take the compliments, but I always tell people it is their hard work and dedication that keeps the parks, the fields,
We're all
and
on the
everything
same
looking
team.
beautiful.
It looks
So,
great.
Yep.
Council President.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Doig. I appreciate your report here and the work that you do and the work that you and your team do. I'm curious, you referenced the way that you, over the years, have been able to take care of and then also refurbish the city's parks and playgrounds. And so I'm just curious if you could share a little bit about plans that you have, what parks or playgrounds you see in need for this coming fiscal year. I know I've been present for lots of conversations about how the Park of the Year line item is not really designated specifically to one park usually. But I am just curious. I know Councilor Crowley and I have both been on conversations about Holcroft Park and its need and its age.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one I definitely am thinking about. I'm sure there's others that you have in mind. So I'm just curious if you could tell us a little bit about where you see some of that funding
Sure.
going.
I do have a plan to apply for another state grant, park grant, for Holcroft Park. And that would be up to a $400,000 grant. We are hopefully going to get some additional state earmarks to help us out with the Simon Street and Holcroft Park area as well. And in addition to that, hopefully some CPC funds. There's a lot of work to be done there. Excuse me, the basketball court has been on our list for a long time, and it's not just something that can be patched and painted. It needs to be replaced or significant structural work to it. So that's going to be costly. The pavilion is an old wooden pavilion that, it's just showing age, and it's easily, vandalized in terms of, benches breaking, things like that. So we'd like to put in one similar to what we have at Aubert Park that's all steel and more durable. More picnic tables, more benches, more, places where people can come to the park, relax, and enjoy the park. And I even envision things like trying to remember the name now, a terrace slide, embankment slide, similar to what we put at Peach Park, where people can go from the top of the hill down to the basketball court. They're becoming very, very popular. They're safe, and that would give kids a fun way to get from one area to the other. We've talked about possibly terrace gardens on the slope, things like that. And actually, I do want to reach out to Councilor Crowley and others and the neighbors over the next few weeks, because the grant application's due in July, and we typically have to have a meeting to discuss plans. But I would also like to continue our discussion about a wish list. What would the neighbors like to see? Because nobody wants to force something in there, and then people say, well, that's not what we wanted. So we did have a couple meetings back in 2020, 2021, outdoors at the park, and hope to have a couple more, and then write the grants and hope that we can get the money. The park grant, we wouldn't hear until the end of the year whether we get the money or not, but it sounds like it's a project that would be very attractive to them because it's an environmental justice neighborhood. And they told us recently that if we were replenishing an entire park, it would be more attractive than just replacing basketball courts. We didn't get the grant that we applied for replacing the basketball courts because they didn't really like the idea of trading asphalt for asphalt. So you can replace a basketball court as part of a renovation, but not the whole thing. So that's kind of my game plan for this year. And we would get the money from the state, from CPC, when I apply for that grant, probably around this time next year. And then we'd be able to kick that project off. So that's my kind of game plan right now. But I've got a lot of work to do in the next month or so to write the grant for the state, and then hopefully keep our fingers crossed that we get it. So other parks, again, 20 years, 28 playgrounds. A lot of them are showing signs of age. Ball's Playground has been, we had to replace the 2 to 5 structure a few years back. The 5 to 12 structure has seen some vandalism and some aging that needs to be replaced. Livingston Park, the original portion of it, is showing some signs of rust and aging. So 20 years, seems like not a long time, but it is when it comes to, people using a playground heavily. I mean, it's good that the kids are using it and so forth, but we are going to have to start investing in those playgrounds again. As I say all the time, if I had all the money in the world, we could solve all the problems. Jocelyn and I have talked for the last couple of years about potential projects. One thing I'd like to do is replace all of the existing water fountains in the parks with bottle filling stations and new water fountains, and we're hoping to do one at Gillis Park with the CPC grant we just received. That'll be kind of our test case. But again, with over 30 playgrounds and more fields throughout the city, that'll be an expensive project, and maybe we can get a grant to do all of that. So that's one of the things as well. But we are looking at all of the playgrounds. What can we do for a maintenance perspective? What do we need to do to replace equipment? Again, CPC is limited to replacement only. You can't do maintenance with CPC, so we rely on the maintenance monies in our budget. The Park of the Year Fund was intended to be a yearly park improvement up until the point where we stopped, not that we stopped, but we had completed replacing all of the parks that needed to be replaced. So now we do use that a lot for some of the ongoing maintenance. Another thing, getting more and more feedback about the benches in the city. Most of those benches were put in before I started, so they're 20-plus years old, and being along the seashore, the salt water is not kind to some of those benches, and the recycled plastic, even though we were told 25 years ago or more that they'll last forever, the recycled plastic is brittle in the sun, and they tend to warp and things, so a lot of them have broken. We've spent a lot of money over the last few years buying new slats and replacing slats, replacing legs, so we're going to continue to do that, but again, that's costly as well. So I have a long list of things I'd like to do, and I'm happy to share that with everybody, but it is going to be costly. So we are moving ahead with, we did get CPC monies a few years ago to do the tennis courts at Cove Playground and at Cahill Park in Centerville. I'm hoping to get an engineer on board to put together the bid documents for that, and then again try to get a contractor on board by the fall, start the project in the fall, and possibly, if necessary, end the project next spring. And I did get an extension from the CPC till next June, so we have another year to do that project and trying to get that ball rolling. And again, even that's going to be probably more costly than what we have for monies right now, but we have some support from the Lynch trustees and some other sources as well. So doing what we can with what we have and trying to make it stretch a long way.
Thank you.
Other questions? Councilor Crowley.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Bruce. Appreciate everything you've been doing so far with us down there in Ward 3 and around there. So I know we've got so we're asking best case scenario that this grant goes through for down that way. So what's plan B?
If it doesn't go through?
If it doesn't go through.
We are looking to get I think a $200,000 state earmark for Simon Street and Holcroft. Some of that money will have to be used at Simon Street to finish that project, the 2 tot lots that were purchased last year. And whatever's left over, we could do at Holcroft, whether it's just a pavilion and picnic tables and benches or some new playground equipment. We'll have to see where we stand after that's over. Like I said, I can apply for some additional CPC funds for that, for Holcroft Park, and then see how much we can get from there. The Lynch trustees would probably be willing to add to that. And actually, I have been talking with the Paracella family for the last several years, and they're interested in helping out as well because their father grew up in that area, used that area a lot. So again, we have some other sources. It'd be nice to get a big chunk and not have to worry about nickel and diming, but we do have some other funding sources to do at least part of the work that we want.
So I know we're talking about big projects and everything else for down there, and one of the things I know we've talked quite a bit extensively on, I guess I'll bring it up again, is the immediate need right down there is lighting. So, there's just not enough, there's too many bare black spots where people can hide, as we'll say. So if we can get anything at all this year, I think we need to concentrate and work with DPW and look at the lighting as far as down at that park goes.
Lighting has always been a touchy situation because some people want it, some people don't want it because they don't want to encourage people to hang out there. But we should certainly talk, have a meeting with, Mr. Collins or the folks from DPS to talk about what can be done with what's already there. What can be, if we do get, some grants, what can be done for maybe low-level lighting along the walkways and so forth. But again, it's a delicate path because some people don't want lights. And lights these days are so directed that there's not a lot of spill, but people still think that, they're going to have lights shining through their bedroom windows at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night or whatever. But we can certainly implement that into a plan based on what people want.
Thank you.
Other questions? Councilor Bowen?
Thank you. I just had a question on sort of past year progress and how things show up in the budget, given that so much of what you do, and particularly the larger projects, come from grants or state funding or some combination of cobbling together lots of funding sources. So in particular, what was hoping you could give an update on the pickleball court construction. And I know that sort of funding plan went in a few different directions. And
Yeah,
since
that
it
was,
doesn't
I
really
mean,
show up here, just was
Right.
wondering how
Well,
that
first of all, the
got
courts are done, except for the sound reduction padding that we're planning to put up. So when that padding comes in, and I think they said it was a 6-week lead time or whatever, we'll be putting that up and putting up the nets for the courts and opening up the courts. From a funding standpoint, yes, we did get $44,000 from the CPC to pay for the sound deadening pads. We were hoping to get $250,000 to pay for the entire project on top of the $200,000 state earmark that we had, but that did not go through. So we're using some of the state earmark monies that we had from another gift a few years ago to improve playgrounds or improve parks, excuse me, towards the pickleball courts to finalize that, pay for the final project. The project was originally bid out at $275,000, or that was the awarded bid, and the current cost is about $390,000 because of some of the improvements we had to make and changes we had to make for the sound reduction and so forth. So we did have to scramble a little bit to find that money. We've talked about it, and we have the money to move forward. And like I said, the courts are done, except for the sound reduction pads, and once they're in, it'll be open.
Go ahead.
Thank you. And I think the neighborhood will appreciate those pads going up before the nets go up. But I'm just more broadly, given that there was some money from a past state earmark that can be used for that. You mentioned a couple of the previous CPC projects that have had extensions. I think a previous Gillis Park project similarly had an extension, and now a new project. Do you have a sense for how much funding is in, I guess not in the enterprise account, but in a capital fund or somewhere else that is either already earmarked for some of those future park priorities that you mentioned, or could be available for them?
Well, again, from the enterprise fund side, you heard the balance is about 250 somewhere, 270 something. Yeah. 248,000 balance, of which we transferred 93 over for the enterprise fund. And that really was to help cover costs of increase. Our part-time salaries budget has gone significantly up because of just competition. We have historically paid minimum wage to anybody new working for us. This year we have to start out at $17 an hour because that's what everybody else is paying. And so we still have great staff members coming on board. We're very happy with the people we brought on board, but we did have to increase that line item both in the general budget and in the enterprise budget to cover that cost.
If I may, Councilor, you may get into a little bit of this more on the capital project funds you just mentioned, which is something that Chairman Houseman is haunting me about. But we have been doing a lot of research. We've had actually 2 meetings already with Commissioner Collins on that, and I think we may have a little bit more of a conversation when the commissioner comes in. I'm hoping we can have some dialogue this fiscal year where we can kind of put our arms around all the capital projects and a whole bunch of things, including recreation too, identifying what they are, how much we spend, how much is available. Some of my strategy in discussions with the finance director is maybe there's some clawing back of money to reduce our debt for some things like the city hall. But we're hoping to have a bigger conversation when Commissioner Collins comes in, so I wanted to make sure you'd be aware of that, that's all.
Thank you.
Questions, Councilor Rand?
Thank you. I have a general question, and then I think questions that apply to the enterprise fund. Are we addressing the enterprise fund at this time, Chairman?
Yes.
Or no? Yeah?
Yeah,
Okay.
no, we can move to the enterprise fund now.
Okay. Excuse me, thank you. I guess first I wanted to ask which line item do we look at for the expenses that come out for scholarships and things like that for the programming for the Parks and Recreation Department?
Well, we received a grant or a donation several years ago from Dorothy Ripley, and so we still have monies left in that account. That was specifically for programs, educational and recreational programs at Lynch Park, so we use a lot of that money for scholarships.
Can you just tell me which line item I would
It's
see?
not in the general budget, it's
Okay.
a separate, number, a separate line account, trust fund, I'm sorry.
Okay.
And
So, are there places in the budget as presented to us that reflect scholarship?
we don't have a line on for scholarships, but
Okay.
whenever we're asked to give a scholarship, we find the money somewhere. Whether it's again through that particular item. We used to get money from the city every year for scholarships through the Jacob Brower Fund. And that, we haven't been receiving as much for that, and we haven't needed it because of this other fund. So we find the money wherever we need to find it. It's not a particular line item in the budget.
Yeah, I would just add, if I could, just to clarify, when we project out the revenues on the enterprise fund side of the house, those are estimates based on what we think we're going to take in for fees for programs, net of any types of scholarships or stuff that may be granted.
Okay. Is there a way to sort of reflect, I guess I would just love to see that number as a tool for understanding how, as a city, we're being inclusive, or also even just as a data point for understanding the need of our community for scholarships in, the Parks and Rec. I'm sure you have a spreadsheet for that, Bruce.
We have the numbers going back as far as I can remember. So yeah, we can go back through and try to pull out the data for the scholarships we've given for camps, but we also do scholarships for other programs as well. As we've mentioned, the CIT, we used to scholarship kids for CIT. Now it's a free program. But if somebody asks, we just, generally I'll say it's a done deal. We'll give somebody a scholarship for something that they need, because we want people to enjoy the programs. If they can't afford it, we'll let them enjoy the programs. But we can go back through and figure out what we've given out for camp scholarships and, potentially other scholarships as well.
A couple follow-ups, thank
Yes,
you.
please.
So I think just in terms of how, now that we have this document that presents in a really accessible way to our community where our priorities are in terms of funding, I think it's a great opportunity to also include that type of information in either the narrative or, some way present what Parks and Rec is doing to include anyone who can't afford the programming. I think that's a great opportunity. And then also you mentioned just now in your explanation that the CIT program is now fully funded. It's not something people have to pay for anymore. Is that correct?
Well, it's not fully funded, but they don't have to pay for it.
Yeah, okay. So the Parks and Rec through the enterprise or your trust?
Yeah, we find the money to pay for the T-shirts and the equipment and the things that we use for that program, the dinners that we give to the kids at the end of the year and so forth. So we did decide to not charge a fee for that program. So this is the first year for that.
That's a huge win, because that was my next question.
Well,
which I feel like some of us have been asking for a number of years, and I think that reflects some of the equity work that this city and you and the administration have been doing over the past couple of years. So thank you for taking that step.
You're welcome. Again, it's been a point of contention for a while, but yes, we're not charging this year, and we'll find the money somewhere to run that program.
Thank you. And then I think my next question is sort of, maybe it could be a budget analyst question. I just want to confirm that I'm seeing through the enterprise program, through the enterprise fund, there's been an increase in expenses, which is mainly, as you pointed out, mainly for staffing, both permanent and part-time staffing. I just sort of want to get, if I could, through you, Chair, to Mr. Perry, your, Mr. Perry's assessment of, like, are these increases sustainable through the enterprise fund? Or should we be, just sort of to talk a little bit about the practice of funding about 15% of our permanent and part-time staffing through the enterprise fund?
Yeah, I would say my analysis, I'm pretty comfortable with that. They do a pretty good job. The enterprise funds is fee-based, so, you know, they have a lot of activity and they collect a lot of fees. In the 7 years, it's been pretty good. One of the telltale signs, Counselor, is that you want to look at what is retained earnings at the end of the year. And while I was trying to give Mr. Doig's money away to the Council of Aging there earlier, the fact, he's happy to give, okay. But when you, to me, when you see $248,000 certified for free cash for that account, given the size of the budget, that tells me it's a healthy budget. I'm not too worried about it, and I think the council shouldn't worry about it either, if that helps.
Thank you.
Yes, go ahead, please.
And one more question, just to advocate for my neighbor here. When and Mr. Perry, you've helped me and this council spend some of that money before, which I think was appropriate and was a good partnership in terms of kind of political activity. I guess when I hear the conversation about Holcroft Park and I hear Plan B being, we'll take, if there's something left over, we'll put it into Holcroft Park. I would love Plan B to sound more like, we have some funds. If the grant does not come through, we will spend money, X amount of dollars on Holcroft Park, rather than let's take the leftovers and put it into Holcroft, which I'm not judging your statement. I understand you're managing a budget in so many parks, but I'm wondering if we could sort of change the story a little bit.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm happy to come up with whatever, you know, plan we want to come up with if we don't get the grants. I was going to follow up with what you were asking. You know, we do pay 2 full-time people out of the enterprise budget. One, our facilities coordinator and our registrar. So I know it's easy to look at a $248,000 balance and say, we've got plenty of money, let's spend $100,000 at, you know, Holcroft or anywhere else, like we did a few years ago with playground repairs. But again, I always get nervous when that budget gets low because we kind of look at it as a rainy day fund. We've netted money every year because we want that money available. And again, we still want to make investments in the carriage house. We still want to, you know, we had to go to the CPC to get money for the carriage house. But, you know, there's a lot of things we'd like to do with that money to reinvest into our programming versus just spending it on capital projects that, again, maybe should come from another source. So, you know, Brian could probably answer better than I.
Thank you.
On the fund balance. You'll recall during the pandemic, the way this particular fund works, this enterprise fund, is that the expenditures happen the first couple months of the fiscal year. All the staffing that funds all the camps. That revenue that resides within the fiscal year comes later in the fiscal year in prepayments for the following summer. So what happened when the pandemic hit was we spent all the money in the budget, but then we had a pandemic and no revenue came in. And we looked to the balance of the enterprise fund to bail us out. And it was 6 figures. We had to dip into the enterprise fund. You all know, you were part of that vote. If we didn't have a healthy balance, it would have shut our shop down. And so it's important that we maintain a healthy balance. And every fund is a little bit different, and we got to understand the nuances to every fund to make sure we're planning for the types of activities that flow through that fund. This amount of a fund balance, 250, is probably about as low as I'm comfortable with. It's grown back over the last couple of years since that issue where we had to dip into it, but I'd like to see it even higher before we start really drawing funds from it for initiatives. That's just my 2 cents.
That's great information. Thank you.
At one point, we had over $400,000 in that account, And again, we were planning to work in the carriage house, and this goes back probably 10 years, but that's when it started going down because we were spending a lot of that money on other things. So, so again, we have plans for the money, you know, and if it's needed somewhere, we'll spend it. But I like to be conservative with that money just because of emergency, you know, rainy day fund. And like Mr. Hale said, you know, that rainy day came, and a lot of people canceled camp, and a lot of people canceled we had to cancel all of our revenue generating programs. So yeah, we had to pay the staff to run the programs for the kids who could come, but we didn't bring in the revenue, so. Anyway.
Thank you.
I have a question in terms of formatting for the digital budget book on this particular enterprise fund. So I've heard in round numbers, and it's unfortunate we're having technical difficulties with our projector here, but I think 250,000 roughly on the enterprise fund balance. On the digital book, if I go into the enterprise fund, you know, I see total salaries and wages for this projected year, you know, 409,000. The numbers don't seem to coincide with the discussion we're having, so I think I'm reading the digital book incorrectly, and I'm wondering if you can help guide myself and anyone else who might sort of dig into the enterprise fund display for this, because it may be transferable as an issue to other enterprise funds. And you feel free to take my computer here if you want while that's coming up, and maybe Mr. Perry can grab it while Mr. Ailes, you're dealing with the technical aspects. Mr. Perry, maybe you could just come up here and take a look at what I'm looking at and tell me what I am not understanding correctly. So this is what I'm looking at in terms of the enterprise fund. I don't know if you.
That doesn't show.
Are you confused? The 248 is retained earnings, which is similar to free cash.
Yeah.
Okay? But the enterprise fund budget, I can't get this to scroll. Here we go.
Mr. Perry, yeah,
Sure.
you're absolutely right. It's
Yeah,
the retained earnings is the 250.
Apples and oranges.
That's something that's sitting.
Yeah, so I know what retained earnings is, but the number of the retained earnings, I'm not finding anywhere in the digital, in the digital book.
It's not in there.
Yeah.
I don't believe they could
Yeah,
add.
the fund balances aren't in there, right?
Got it, okay.
Well, partly too, because we'd be looking at June 30th of 2022 fund balances, right?
Mhm.
Every time Mr. Perry references them, it's a year ago.
Yeah, so I'm gonna find that in all the enterprise funds, I gather is what you're saying. The amount of the retained earnings in any given enterprise fund is not gonna show up here.
It's not gonna show up there. However,
Yeah.
this is why this is important, right? As our first year, and Council Rand said something earlier that kind of triggered in my mind, okay, that's something for next year we might look to incorporate. We're taking notes, we'll review all this, and there's real value in kind of laying that out there probably in the initial description of what the previous year's fund balance certification was.
Yeah, because, I mean, as I look at this, I mean, you could, I guess, essentially look at this maybe as cash flow through the enterprise fund. That's what I'm looking at. And I'm you know, scrolling and saying, where's my retained earnings here, right, basically.
Without Mr. Perry's reference or memo, you have no reason to know how accurate my suggested revenue draw is, or fund balance draw is.
What I could do, Mr. Chairman, with your permission, over the weekend, I sent the memo with all the retained earnings to you last November. How about I resend it to everybody again? You can have it for starting Tuesday night, the memo I'll take you. Now, we've drawn some of it down, especially on the general fund free cash, but I'm more than happy, it's about a November memo.
Yeah,
I'll forward that
that would be useful, because especially next week, Mr. Collins, we have a whole host of enterprise funds there, and I think having that additional information available to us may aid in the conversation.
And I put in my memorandum, my 10-page memo, but I'll repeat that. Yes, the administration does use some of the retained earnings to balance the budgets and the enterprise funds. I've reviewed each and every one of them, and I pointed out in my memo that there are sufficient funds, retained earnings to use in each and every one of them. So, but I will send that memo to everybody, so I'll have it again.
Yeah, that'd be helpful, just to dovetail what I see here with that information.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from counselors on the Recreation Department or the Enterprise Fund for the Recreation Department? Hearing none. Bruce, I think we're all set. Thanks for coming in, and thank you for the
I forgot to
discussion.
mention, thank you very much, but forgot to mention, I'm the old man now of the, I think, certainly of the community services. Again, I look at these younger folks and say, they're doing a great job. They have a lot of energy and passion, and not that I don't, but I am definitely getting a little long in the tooth and heading for the senior center, so. Very much.
Well, you have good company. Mr. Perry was reading from the wrong page and didn't know it. With no other comments, I would entertain a motion to adjourn Committee of the Whole.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. And from Finance and Property similarly, is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor to adjourn? Aye. We are adjourned. Carries 3-0.